On this episode of the InsurTech Geek Podcast, we're talking about leading digital development and distribution in high-hazard workers' comp with Basilios Manousogiannakis from AMERISAFE. The InsurTech Geek Podcast is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. We'll be interviewing guests and doing deep dives into specific tech we see changing the industry. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech, so enjoy the ride and geek out. Terra, this week's episode sponsor, is revolutionizing the world of workers' compensation claims and policy management. Terra's cutting-edge platform empowers insurers with comprehensive benchmarking tools, robust management systems, and an integrated ancillary services marketplace. Discover how Terra is driving innovation and efficiency in workers' comp at terra.insure. That's terra.insure. And we are back with another great episode. With me, as always, my illustrious co-host, the most interesting man in insurance, my main man with the plan from San Antonio, Rob Galbraith. Rob, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. It's going well. Temps are cooling down. It's a beautiful time of year here in Texas. We don't have the cooler temperatures compared to Northeast or the leaves turning, but yeah, it's still nice. Anything that's in low 90s as opposed to hundreds is good here.
But you know what it smells like and feels like? Football. So it's all good.
There we
it's
go.
all good. It's always interesting. It's always good being back in football season. And, all the pumpkin spice fanatics are out ordering pumpkin spice muffins, pumpkin spice lattes, pumpkin spice everything. Now with us is Basilios. Basilios, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, and feel free to call me B. And I was, I'd like to joke, Rob's the most interesting man in insurance. I'm going to go ahead and tag myself as the least interesting man in insurance. All right. But I'm doing well. I'm really honored and humbled to be on here. I mean, you both are like titans of industry, so thanks for having me on.
Well, B, thanks for joining us. You and I got to meet through the Kids Chance tournament.
Yeah.
Which like, I've been building software for insurance. I started my company in my dorm room 23 years ago at Texas A&M and got into insurance 3 years later, like most people, by accident. I did not intend to get into insurance. I landed a client who was in insurance and then fell in love with it. and then a few years later, I got into workers' comp. And I'm just so mad at myself for not knowing about Kids Chance. And what a great job they do. What an amazing thing. That's how we met. And we're going to talk about that towards the end, but that's just your little teaser out there in listener land that we're going to talk about Kids Chance and Kids Chance Florida. But before we talk about that, we're going to talk about AMERISAFE. And before we talk about AMERISAFE, we're going to talk about UB.
Okay. So
let's, because it's a technology show about technology and insurance, but we're going to lean heavily into talking about the people behind it. We do that, for literally like 147 episodes.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the people behind technology and insurance. And so tell us about yourself. Like, where were you born and raised? And then what led you career-wise? Like, what'd you intend to go into career-wise, and how'd you end up in insurance?
No. So I'm a native of Northeast Ohio. So I was born and raised in Akron, Ohio. So home of LeBron James. Yeah, that's A in the rubber industry at some point. So I think I can hit on that a little bit. My actually foray into insurance was by design. So to one of the carriers' credit, they did a really good job recruiting straight out of college. And so my first job, and my life has come like really full circle within insurance, was inputting first notice of loss for workers' compensation, and then evolved throughout. And, I was really lucky. And this is something that why Kids Chance speaks to me, and some other areas that I try to find time for, is I had a very passionate mentor early on that kind of guided me through the journey of insurance, talked about the three legs of insurance. And you soon realize it's much broader than three-legged stool of insurance, right? Sales, underwriting, claims. And as you grow, you realize, oh man, there's IT, there's audit, there's regulatory, there's compliance, all sorts of things. But he really planted the seed around spend your first half of your career just kind of exploring all facets of insurance, and then decide on where you want to spend your time the second half of your career, right? And become a deep expert into it. And I'm not calling myself a deep expert by any means. I'm still very, very junior, building my muscle. But that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. A lot of it being luck, a lot of it being, I think, some by design too. But it's been a very rewarding career for me. And so, I like to share that story that, while it may not be the sexiest industry, it is something that can be very rewarding and fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think both Rob and I can attest to the same thing: that rewarding, fulfilling, interesting, complex.
For sure.
I thrive on complexity. I think it's fun, and when there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of challenges, and that makes for fun times for a problem-solving personality type, which of course is what a lot of us are. In particular, if you have any involvement in technology, you're typically a problem solver. You live in Tampa now, correct?
Yeah. I live in Tampa, Florida. My wife is from the area, so we have 2 young kids, and that's where we decided to plant our roots.
Yeah, and you've been at AMERISAFE for about a year as vice president of alternative distribution. What does AMERISAFE do?
So AMERISAFE is a publicly traded monoline work comp carrier. We focus on what we'd call high hazard, so that E, F, and G. Also hard to place at times in industries such as like construction, logging, transportation. I actually love the story of AMERISAFE itself because we talk about innovation, and I would argue that AMERISAFE is a story of innovation. So it started out as an independent insurance agency, and in a span of 30 years transformed into a publicly traded, listed on the NASDAQ, A-rated, admitted carrier. So I think to accomplish that in a span of 30 years is pretty transformational and pretty darn innovative.
Yeah, and rare.
Right.
I would argue it's rare to see someone, make the leap from agency into full-fledged public carrier.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Like, usually they'll just acquire more agencies, right? That's usually the growth path, or at best become an MGA. But I haven't seen, I know that some make that leap, but it's just difficult. I mean, it's difficult. Obviously, when you go public, you can raise the capital necessary to have the backing to become a carrier, but that's obviously it's really challenging. It's a really challenging path. Now you worked in a whole variety of jobs, and we don't have to go through all of them, but you were in Columbus for a while, you were in DC for a while, but your whole career has been insurance. And you started in the area that I've really been spending the most time on, which is claims, right?
Right.
You started as an actual adjuster, right?
So I actually take it one step back. I was actually just kind of, at that time, the role was called like a benefits administrator, truly admin role, taking in those first notice of loss as those comp claims were being reported, and then slowly progressed to litigated claims. And then when I was in claims, you go, well, wait a minute, all these underwriters are getting all the glory. What's that all about? And then moved into underwriting. And
that
then
was your next job.
Yeah. And then when I went into underwriting, you go like, wait a minute, these sales folks are like driving some really nice cars. So then I went into sales, but behind all that was the guidance that my mentor, Dick Smith, had given me. And that was to kind of just explore the 3 legs of insurance. Right. And then when I was in sales, that's when I like to joke, I caught the InsurTech bug, and then kind of that role kind of evolved into this. I kind of forced my own hand to say, all right, I need to pivot a little bit. And so stepped away from the carrier side for a bit and worked at Applied Ivans, which is a vendor to the insurance industry, to try and learn that side of the house. And then ultimately was called back to the dark side of insurance and worked for the carrier again. What I learned is I love commercial lines, and I love, like you said, insurance is complex. While I love like that analogy of like giving an Amazon-like experience, it's far more complex than Amazon in many capacities, right? We should strive for that, but it's far easier said than executed.
Yeah. Far easier.
Far yeah, easier. I would argue far easier for sure.
I mean, look, I've built software. I am my team, right? We have 280 people here at JB Knowledge, but we built software. Probably 70% of our software we built for workers' comp, and then a good bit for property, and then a good bit for health, life, and disability, which was one I was an area I did not expect to go into. landed a customer there, fell in love with that too. I'm like, man, this industry never gets
Yeah.
boring. Like there's
Yeah.
always like another corner. There's something else to do. And of course, what you did is you kind of wound your way through a lot of these different areas, which I think is really cool. And you know, you're in a particularly interesting area of work comp. Again, work comp is my main area of focus, and that is high hazard. Like basically, if you can blow you up, burn you, cut you, you know, I mean, if it can do something really bad, that's what you insure. You insure the stuff that's particularly dangerous, right?
Yeah. Like our kind of pitch is if they show up in hard hat, safety goggles, and steel-toed boots, climbing cell phone towers all the way to the bottom of the ocean, we're your carrier of choice. And I think, you know, earlier on we talked about how difficult that journey is to go from agency to carrier. But then you think about on top of it all, being a carrier for high hazard, hard to place comp, right? That is severity based outcomes, generally speaking, when something happens. So it is a very unique product. I think we are a hidden gem in the marketplace. But we, you know, to be able to post combines in the 80s and the 90s consistently in this segment of business speaks to the focus that our company has around, you know, the customer, risk management, claims handling, you know, building those like long-term relationships with our policyholders and our agents.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob?
Yeah. So we had the opportunity. We've touched base a couple of times along the way, but I think we first met in 2019 when I was on my book tour in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, at a NAMIC event. And,
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were just reminiscing prior to hitting record on that a little bit. So, you know, I'm really curious. Obviously, I think at that time when we first met, we both shared kind of an enthusiasm for technology, for its possibility in insurance, for innovation. You obviously have seen multiple sides of kind of now InsurTech over the past, you know, 10 years or so, however long we want to kind of use that term.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just kind of curious your thoughts, you know, 5 years on from that initial meeting of where have we been? Maybe what have you been excited about seeing? What surprised you? Maybe what we haven't seen or what's taken a little bit longer, and kind of like broadly, you know, what are kind of some hopes for the future?
Yeah, man, that's such a loaded question. I think relatively speaking, I'm really surprised at the pace that we have accelerated, right? So where we were 5 years ago, and I'll probably talk more specifically around like distribution, right? Because that's where my passion lies. And you know, how do we find the customer where they want to be met or don't know yet, right? And so I think when we look back 5 years ago, where the marketplace was within commercial lines, was pretty early in its journey, right? And where it is today, we're now talking about like embedded insurance and being, you know, planted into an ecosystem or a platform where that end customer, who is typically a business owner, is interacting and making more important decisions. So you look at that and you compare that against where personal lines, if you were to like kind of overlay the roadmap, took longer to get there, right? And so there's been a fairly rapid acceleration in commercial lines. I think the journey to move upstream is probably going to take a little bit more time because it does become a lot more complex. It's not as transactional in nature. So I would say, you know, back to when we met in 2019 to where we are today, that is really what stood out to me. I know there's much broader things that have happened, but I have been kind of somewhat laser focused in digital distribution and digital platforms. But I would say I've been pleasantly surprised to see how much progress we have made and how many entrants we've seen in the marketplace to help support that.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the company for just a second. Now, I just want to talk about this for a second because I'm from Louisiana.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. I have been to DeRidder, Louisiana.
Okay.
Have you been to headquarters?
Oh yeah, no, I'm there frequently. So I mean, I didn't realize you were from Louisiana. This is pretty awesome. Yeah. My folks, you know, our folks will get excited as they listen into this podcast even more.
Yeah. So I have been to DeRidder. I've been all over the state. I mean,
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. My dad's from New Orleans. Mom's from Houma. My uncle lived in Shreveport, or as they say, Shreveport. My ophthalmologist was in Alexandria, or was, as we say, Ellick. So we have all of our little funny things that we do in Louisiana. Yeah. DeRidder's it's a Louisiana town if there ever was a Louisiana town.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it screams Cajun culture, right?
It does. in like the most awesome way. And
For sure.
I'm half French, so my mom and them, as they would say, are from the Bayou down in Houma. No, so. And the French immigrants from the 1700s, and so it's interesting. But this little company in DeRidder goes into being a public company that's writing $285 million a year in gross premium revenue, which is not a small amount of premium in this space. And doing it, 47%. I'm looking at your annual filings from 2023. 47% of it in construction.
Right.
And I spent 12 years in the construction industry building software for construction while I did the insurance stuff. This is not an easy business to nail down.
Right? No, for sure. And go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
My first question is, the whole industry, we're seeing premiums compress, right? Like you're seeing in work comp, premiums are coming down, but y'all had growth from 2022 to 2023 in premium written. So you're expanding in a contracting market on premium, and you're hitting some phenomenal combines. So like, what role is technology playing in this, and what role is just amazing, really good underwriting and claims handling?
Yeah. So, I have to be delicate and diplomatic in how I answer this question, right? Because we're a publicly traded company. So I think, I go back to the focus piece of it. The other aspect too is, we've built our expertise on these specific verticals, right? We have about 7 that we really focus on: construction, wood products, which includes logging, and that's kind of where we bit our teeth, USL&H, or the wet business, and several others. One component that we are, and you'll see it in our our filings and our earnings reports, is our intensity in a good way around safety and safety management and claims management, right? And so when we partner with our agents and that customer, there is a concierge level focus on safety that we believe they're generally getting underserved in other markets, right? And so that helps us better underwrite the business as we bring it in, understand that profile. I would argue it comes to the expertise piece. The talent, we have folks at AMERISAFE that have been there 20 years and have, a depth of knowledge that we might not experience at other companies. And so I would call back to the focus piece of this all.
Awesome. And talking about technology, like what are the top pieces of tech that you think have really contributed in the workers' compensation space to helping companies like yours be successful?
Yeah, I think again, a lot of my focus will probably be around distribution, right? I can touch a little bit on underwriting because when you bring in the product, right, you want to make sure that the product performs. Claims is probably an area that I have the biggest blind spot, at least as of recent, just because that focus has been around distribution and partnering with underwriting. You can't ignore the call to data, right? You can't ignore the call to automation and AI. There's intensified pressure to improve speed to market in the space, right? That going back to that expectation set from agents and policyholders of like, why can't I get something in a matter of minutes or in a matter of days? Why does it take several weeks, right? And so leveraging that tech and the data-driven technologies that can help support fast tracking that is probably where a lot of carriers are spending their time, particularly in workers' comp, right? Getting the right insights to make more informed decisions, better pricing. You had called to the rate-driven environment, right? That makes that challenge even more challenging because that you have a call to grow at a higher clip than you do maybe as some other carriers that have their lines hardening and property and GL, et cetera. So there's a level of discipline, particularly for monoline comp carriers, that I think not many others have to experience. And so it's been an interesting challenge. I've only been about 10 months in this role, so I'm still learning the AMERISAFE way and the culture and how we've built such a center of excellence for workers' compensation.
Yeah, awesome. Rob?
So B, I really want to kind of get to the heart of alternative distribution and getting to our kind of listeners and viewers, what is that and what does that mean specifically to you? We talked a little bit about technology, right? And kind of going to personal lines first and then that migration over to commercial lines. And specifically when I think about distribution, I think about like the small business sector, the stuff that looked a little bit more, quote unquote, like personal lines, right?
Right.
That you could either, sell online or be part of some marketplace or whatnot. But obviously high hazard work comp is not the one that kind of immediately, I guess, leaps to mind as one that would do that. So, what is your traditional distribution? I assume that's kind of the agent brokers. And then what does alternative mean to you? I know some companies that have that agent broker foundation, they're worried about channel conflict or the perception, right? Or are you going direct around this? What does it mean for our commissions, et cetera? So maybe you can just kind of talk about the way that you've typically done business from a distribution standpoint, and then what alternative distribution means to AMERISAFE.
Yeah. So, I mean, our distribution is built on the back of agents, right, and brokers, and that will not change. I think when it comes to alternative distribution, it's really trying to figure out, can we expand our reach beyond like those traditional channels, right? And so that focus that we're trying to build and develop is around digital platforms and partnerships. And are there other like innovative solutions that can help us get our product either into underserved segments or help improve our shelf space within our existing channels, including agents and brokers, right? So we see this emergence of agents continuing to leverage technology, and so we want to make sure we're there, right? The M&A aspect of this all too is, right, as agents are selling or getting acquired, there is an evaluation that's being made at the senior executive management level that says, hey, does carrier do X, Y, and Z? And so in that decision tree, sort of, you'll see this aspect of like, are they tech enabled? Is there an ease of doing business, right? And so we want to make sure that if one of our largest partners were to ever make that decision, that we can be positioned in a way that says, yeah, they meet all the markers that we want to continue this relationship in the future.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about submissions and renewals and all the data you have to gather to actually produce quotes. Have there been innovations there that have allowed you to more rapidly get all this information together and do your job better? Like, walk me through what tools are really making a difference that you see making a difference.
Yeah, and I can't speak to AMERISAFE specifically in some capacities,
no.
Right?
It's not about AMERISAFE.
Yeah.
This is about the industry in general. Yeah. You've been involved. You've been in all this for years. So
yeah, I think
where do you see this headed?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, I think some of the like low hanging fruit, classifications continue to be a challenge in the space, right? And so you see a lot of strong solutions out there that are looking to solve for that. And it's also been feedback that's been brought to our attention by our own agents, right? As they're bringing in new workforce, that classification. Hey, how do I, particularly in high hazard, and then recognizing, subcontractor exposure, things like that. How do I handle that and identify that? So, come time when there's an audit, I'm not slamming my customer with like an AP, right, or additional premium. But in terms of the tech that is capturing my attention in the space, one is going back to classifications. Second is the AI and automation. There are some really neat, I would say, earlier stage providers out there that are leveraging either virtual surveys or CCTV to kind of gain insights and layer that into, hey, based on what we're seeing, can we identify if this is a preferred risk, or here's some insights as to how to mitigate some of the vulnerabilities on a job site or at a client. So it is comp is interesting too, because in certain segments that my personal view is the data is not matured yet in some capacities to give meaningful insights. I can't tell you how many times in my career that we've tried something and one of two things generally happens. One, we didn't do a great job of scoping it, or second, we did a pretty good job of scoping it. And then when we go to leverage the solution, we find out the accuracy is not at a confidence level that we need it to be to continue to invest in it and get a return, right? And so I'll pause there because I feel like I went a little long-winded on that one.
Oh no, it's awesome. I'd love to kind of do a slight pivot and talk about software specific solutions in particular. In construction, you've spent a few years, at least according to your LinkedIn, you've spent about 5 years advising a construction software company.
Right.
Specifically, I mean, are there innovations occurring? Of course, I spent a lot of time in construction software.
Yeah.
Like an excessive amount of time, and ran a construction technology podcast for several years. So I have my opinions on this, but I'm interested in your opinions on what's going on in construction software and how that's impacting environmental health and safety, and incident rates, severity, et cetera.
Yeah. So I have an opportunity. So to sit as an advisor on a company called Siteform. Also happens to be a really close friend of mine that we've grown close friends since our days in college. And so a lot of the areas that I help support is more focused around go to market, right, and how to distribute. And but it is very interesting to see like the adjacencies of manual and paper that we experience in insurance and see that happening within construction too, right? And I would probably argue the how do I frame this? It's probably even more magnified, right? And you probably have more risk walking onto a job site and relying on someone checking off a piece of, a box on a piece of paper, right? And so I'm still very much learning that space. But as I understand, James, I think you probably were really successful in that space and even had an exit on that space. So I'd be curious to get.
Yeah, I was super involved. Are you buddies with Andrew Barker?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. So I built a bidding software company, so I got super involved in bidding software, pre-qualification, subcontractor management, compliance, certificate compliance, and then got hooked up with some really great folks at AXA and worked with them. They built a really cool construction ecosystem, and what they found and what we found in general is that construction companies that heavily leverage modern technology stacks for managing people and projects and processes and safety and inspections, oversight, they have a lower incident rate of claims. Not just work comp claims. We're talking about they have a lower failure rate on lower default rate on failure rate with bonds. You look at all their builder's risk policies and their general liability and their property, and then their the commercial auto is another really big problem for them as well. You can kind of look across all lines when they really heavily leverage technology, they move away from paper, and they have an auditable process for how they oversee their operations, and they have a way to tell if it's being done right. Being done on time. And it turns out they're safer and better risks as well. And so there is a true correlation, at least we found it. It doesn't mean maybe it's across the entire industry, but across the data sets that we were able to look at.
Isn't that crazy? Like if you care about your business and you're proactive about preventing claims, you actually perform better. Like that's a wild concept, right?
It was actually like a double though. Yeah. Because what would happen is they would be making more money because the projects themselves are more profitable because they're making fewer mistakes. Like the big stupid mistakes in construction are having to redo work. Like rework is just a killer. Right. Building the right thing in the wrong place, or the wrong thing in the right place, or the wrong thing in the wrong place. Right. Those are kind of the big three. That happens a lot, unfortunately. It's usually because they're on the wrong version of plan files, or the wrong specs, or they didn't collaborate or coordinate properly, or the models aren't coordinated well, and so you have a pipe intersecting a wall. I mean, So it turns out that like if you really dial the digital strategy in, you connect all the data elements together. You connect your BIM, your 3D model with your 2D plans and your specs, and then you tie it all together, and then you integrate it with your environmental health and safety management, which is the big catch. If you manage people, process, and technology, you can actually have a much more profitable project, and then you also have fewer claims, which then drives your profitability even higher because claims are so expensive. Like fatalities are unbelievably expensive.
Right. Right.
They can cost tens of millions of dollars for a single fatality. Where comp claims aren't much better. They can be really, really pricey as well. And so, it's a really interesting correlation. And that's why I think it's, good carriers and TPAs are getting very interested in their clients, their insureds, adopting digital strategies. Because it turns out if they're a better run company, they're a better risk to write. And I've got another example. If you ascribe to lean, the system pioneered by the Japanese and reducing the number of steps in manufacturing and improving efficiency and eliminating waste. If you ascribe to lean and you study a construction site, you'll find that one of the best things you can do is reduce the number of steps workers have to take between where the materials are, where the bathroom is, which sometimes can be a mile away, and where the job face is that they're working on. Because the average construction worker is only working at the job face like less than half the time. They're actually doing work. There's a lot of wasted time just walking around. But it turns out when you reduce the number of steps they take walking around, guess what you're also doing? Reducing the incident rate of slip, trip, fall, collisions. Right. So it's really it's really super connected. And so that's I guess why when I saw that in your resume, I'm like, man, he's got the combo. He's got construction software and comp.
I think you're giving me too much credit, but it does tie into, I think what's been, an opportunity for our industry is recognizing, like, reaching the customer in like more important decision points, or framing the solution in a way that matters more to them versus talking the insurance speak, right? So far too often we say we can save you X, Y, and Z, but James, just even how you framed it, right, around like, how is this going to actually help me run my business more profitably, more, and create more success? Like if we can improve margin, if we can improve revenue, if we can improve customer experience, that's what you're looking for, and how to, position that versus the tried and true, well, we can save you a little bit of money on your insurance, right? Like, I know, like within workers' comp, like when a claim occurs, I don't think the family's going, thank God I saved 10% on insurance and I'm getting a terrible claims experience, right? They're going, thank God I got a carrier that is bedside with me in the moment that matters.
100%. And to kind of conclude our discussion today, I want to talk about Kids Chance, because you talk about being bedside. And you talk about really walking with people through the muck. I don't think it gets much better than the mission of Kids Chance. So now Rob was in comp for quite a while when he worked for AF Group. I've been obviously working in comp for a long time. Tell us about Kids Chance and what its mission is.
Yeah, no, it's even just the way you frame it. I get a little teary eyed because it is so powerful, right? So Kids Chance at its core is a national organization. We have chapters across every state. And what we do is we provide scholarships to children of workers who have been like seriously injured or fatally injured in the workplace, right? And so you think about that impact to that family. If they have children, that financial support gets really stressed now. And giving that opportunity, or opening that opportunity for access to education, is at our core, our mission. Kids Chance of Florida specifically is one of the younger chapters. We started in 2015, and since our inception, we've awarded about 85 individual scholarships, totaling over $375,000. Right, so you're talking a meaningful chunk of support for these students. And James, I'd be remiss not to call out and thank you and Tara for your support at the recent golf tournament. Huge success because of partners like yourselves, but you got to experience firsthand, right? Having one of those students share their story, Gabriella talking about her aspirations to become a physician and how we helped her. We were honored to help her on her journey to going on to medical school on top of it all, right? And so Kids Chance just isn't about giving financial support. We're alongside with those students throughout their entire journey. So it's not just the money, it's also helping them, providing care packages as they go off to college, giving them mentorship. It is an organization that I think continues to focus on building awareness. I know for us in our chapter, that's something at our core that we'd like to do. But yeah, I'll pause there because it is something near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful organization. Rob, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I've heard of it, but I wasn't as familiar with their work. So I'm so glad that you guys had the ability to kind of share the story and get involved. And James, I know you mentioned there's a chapter here in Texas. So if people want to know more about Kids Chance, what's the best way they can kind of learn more and maybe some ways they can get involved if they choose to do so?
Yeah, I think the first stop would just go to the national the national website, and that's kidschance.org. And on there, I think there is I don't have it in front of me, but there is a section to get involved. So I would think that's your very first step, right? Get connected to the local chapter, see how you can either be an ambassador or volunteer or sponsor. Every chapter is unique, and so each chapter has their own way of approaching and supporting the students impacted in their local markets. For us, one of the cornerstone events that we host every year to raise funds is our annual golf tournament that precedes one of the largest workers' compensation events, and that's the WCI annual conference in Orlando, Florida. So we've been really lucky to be alongside them, and so we've hosted that tournament for 4 years now. We've sold out every year, and this year we raised in just on that event alone, $82,000.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is something that is fundamentally a part of our organization. And just a shout out to every volunteer, every sponsor, every participant. Just a sincere thank you. It means a lot.
Yeah. And it's a super fun day too. So if I can just say, like, it's just an all around good thing. Insurance, when we've talked a few times, Rob and I have, about just the moral good and that insurance does when done ethically, right? Of course, there's always that condition, right? But that we do have an obligation, fiduciary obligation to policyholders to fulfill the promise, right?
Right.
To truly indemnify them, to restore them to the original state. And there's a lot of activities on this planet that wouldn't occur if there was no insurance for them. As referenced by when markets dry up for insurance, activity in that business sector or personal line sector can dry up too. If people can't get home insurance, they might not buy those houses anymore. I mean, you're in an area that's experienced that in Florida. And so there's a moral good that insurance does because it helps restore people. It's run privately, not by the government, although there obviously are government-backed insurance companies. But there is a really great thing they do. But when insurance folks come together and say, hey, there's still a need that's not listed in the policy, sending their kids to college is not an item that's covered in the policy. Right?
No.
But this is something. So I just wanted to call it out as something that's really cool. It's really amazing. Getting to hear from her and the impact this had, not just in the money, not just in the scholarships, but also the emotional and support and having a team behind her, and it's all volunteer. It's just a great deal. So I can't say enough about it. Go to kidschance.org. If you go to WCI, sponsor the Kids Chance Florida tournament.
Yes. Thank you.
So, I mean, that's an easy one. Yeah. Like the whole damn industry goes to Orlando in August every year. And by the way, I wish it was a different month, but it's August.
Oh man. So it's a funny, I'll share a funny story around that. Right. So the first year we hosted it was like coming right out of the pandemic. And so I think that year WCI had hosted it in December. And so like the weather was like perfect. And so I was newer to the chapter. And so I had thought that that's when that happened every year. And so I said, I gladly volunteered myself. Hey, I'll go ahead and chair up the tournament. And then come to find out, oh no, that was the one-off. We host it every year in August. And I'm like, oh boy, talk about like the hottest month, right? But we do our best to make it enjoyable, keep everyone entertained. The one thing I just wanted to close with Kids Chance in particular, and you hit on this, James, is the moment that stood out to me when I was a claims rep and I was handling litigated claims is I had one case in particular that just ultimately broke my heart. And I remember being in that moment saying, what else can I do? Right. And I didn't know this organization existed, right? It didn't exist yet in Florida, but it did exist in other states. And I look at that moment and go, man, if everyone just knew about us and other organizations that are adjacent or serving similar purposes, to be that, here's the additional thing that I can do, right? That's not covered on the policy terms and conditions, but goes above and beyond. Because ultimately, while our industry may not be sexy, I would argue it's probably one of the most meaningful industries, because we are there for the customer when it matters most, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, Rob, any closing comments?
No, it's so great to have you on, B, and hear a little bit about your career and your experience, your work at AMERISAFE, and obviously for sharing the story of Kids Chance. So great to catch up. Glad to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you again. It's really been an honor and a privilege, and I hopefully did you both justice on this podcast.
Absolutely. And B, I'll be hitting you up my next trip to Tampa. I come down a good bit down there to Tampa. And or I guess it's being called now Tampalando, since Tampa and Orlando they appear to be merging. They appear to be in a very slow M&A activity between the two. It's kind of like Austin and San Antonio are just very slowly converging into one giant metropolitan area, which it looks like Tampa and Orlando are. So I'll definitely hit you up next time I'm down there. But appreciate you being on. Thank you for being on the InsurTech Geek podcast, and to our listeners in Listenerland, thank you for tuning in today to geek out our interview with Basilios, or B, from AMERISAFE. See you next episode. The InsurTech Geek podcast is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. I've been your host, James Benham. That's jamesbenham.com, with co-host Rob Galbraith at endofinsurance.com. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech, so enjoy the ride and geek out.